Need a super basic intro to Illustrator because you want a laser cut? This video is for you. Hello and welcome to Adobe Illustrator Basics for Laser Cutting. I'm James Thurman, a faculty member at University of North Texas, and I use Illustrator pretty much exclusively for digital fabrication. So I probably know less than 1% of all of what Illustrator is capable of. So this video is for you beginners out there to just focus in on those basics and get you ready to cut some stuff out with a laser. Jump right in. I've opened up Illustrator and ready to get started. It can help to know what material you're going to be working with for how you're going to set up your digital file. So what I'm planning to do for this demo is I'm going to work with a 12-inch square piece of acrylic that I'm going to laser cut out a little cuff bracelet. So when I do a new file, thinking of that material, I'm going to set up my artboard for the size of material that I'm working with. So even though that you're working on the computer, you want to always be thinking of ultimately the material that you're going to be working with. So let's just say this is the sample bracelet. And I've got the 12-inch square there, ready to go. And another thing that I like to work with, this is more of a personal preference, is I always set up so that I can see rulers and a grid so that I'm always thinking about that material that I'm going to be working with. So this artboard here, I'm thinking of as that acrylic that I'm ultimately going to be cutting the bracelet out of. Now, one of the things that can be overwhelming or confusing when you're learning new software is that there's multiple ways to do the same thing. So I'm not going to bog everybody down with going through every possible way to do that. So a lot of times I'm working over here on the right with the properties window, and I'll get into layers and things like that in a little bit. But there's other ways of doing it. So just like with the ruler and grid, you can go under view and you can pull up your rulers, or you can hide the grid or anything like that. So a lot of programs have similar sort of setups. So just choose the way that you like to work. For this video, I'm not going to do any keyboard shortcuts, even though that's something that I do in my own practice, just because you can't really see what it is that I'm doing there. So I've got this all set up, and we're ready to set up the piece. Now, another thing that you may or may not remember from geometry class is, since you're dealing with a grid and two-dimensional material, is you have to think of the X and Y axes. So X is moving across the horizontal there, and Y is moving up and down, or the vertical orientation. So that'll be helpful as you're working with this grid and starting to draw some things and getting into coordinates and things like that. So I'm going to make a rectangle. So over here we have all these different tools, and they'll have some pop-ups, but if you click and hold on the tools, there's many different options. So sometimes students when they're learning the program get frustrated because they'll pick one of these options and then they'll try and find the rectangle, and the rectangle's been gone. So you can click and hold, and then all of the tools under that icon will pop up. So I'm just going to do a rectangle, and since it's a cuff, I'm going to do approximately 1.5 inches by 6 inches, and I've just drawn something approximately there. So I just clicked and held, drawing from corner to corner, and we have that rectangle. Now with laser cutting, we really just need the outlines of things. So what this is drawn is a box that has a black outline. You can see this icon here with a white fill. So we don't really need that white fill, and it might just cause confusion later. So what I'm going to do is eliminate that fill. So now I just have the black line. And you can see when I drew that shape, more information came up over there in the properties. And so it's saying both where it is in the coordinates of X and Y, and then also its width and height. So generally, just to make good use of material, I put pieces that I'm cutting close to the edge, but I leave at least 1/8 of an inch if I can from the edge. And so this is the coordinate of the top left corner of the rectangle. And so I'm just actually going to just type in 0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch, and then 0.125 again, and that'll put it right up close to the corner there. You could do that by clicking and dragging the rectangle around, but I like to be a little bit more precise. And then, like I said, I wanted this to be 1.5 inches high. So again, just clicking and typing that in, and 6 inches long. And so now I have that rectangle that I want to be working with. So again, multiple ways to do the same thing, but I tend to use the properties menu a lot just so I can get greater precision with things. I'm actually going to use this rectangle that I've drawn as a template or just sort of a guide for the actual bracelet that I'm going to cut out. And so now is a great time to get into talking about how to use layers. So over here we have a layers menu, and this can keep different parts that you're working on separated. And so you can hide or lock these layers so that you can see them but not change them, or even not see them if you don't want to be distracted as you get into more complicated pieces. So for this layer, I'm just going to call this the templates. And then I'm going to make a new layer, which you do down here. And I'm going to call this the bracelet exterior. And I am going to lock this template layer. And so remember, you want to click on whatever layer you're going to be working on. And so I'm going to be working on that exterior layer so I can still see this, but I'm not going to be able to select it or anything else. And so now we're going to get into the main tool that I use in Illustrator, the pen tool, and just start drawing. So the pen tool has many different options. I'm just going to start off with its super basics. So if you just click and release, it will draw straight line segments to the next point where you click. And so you can just kind of keep going. Let's say I'm going to make this crazy, weird, angular thing. And if you return back and click on the first point that you started with, and you see that little circle, it's going to create a closed form, which if you want to cut something out with laser cutting, that is really important that it closes all the way, or else it's not going to cut all the way and you're going to have to do some cleanup and everything afterwards. A couple other options pop up, as you can see when you mouse over areas. So these are different control points of your shape. And if you bring the pen tool back over it, you see it turns to a little minus, and that will remove that control point that you put in there. Now, as always with most programs, if you do something that you really don't like, you can undo. So you undo, delete, anchor, and it'll put it back, or again, that keyboard shortcut. And so that is the most basic way to draw. Now, you may want to draw something with curved segments as opposed to straight segments, and there's a very easy way of changing these anchor points so that then they have these handles that will control the curves. So right now, let's say I've already drawn this and I want to change it. I can click and hold, and holding that menu down, we can go to the anchor point tool, and then as I go to the different anchor points and click and drag, you can see that these handles come off of it, and these handles then change it from a straight line segment to a curvature. And the best way to think of the location of these handles, I think of it as almost kind of a gravitational attraction. And so you can see it's at that center of the curve that it's generating for it. So you can control the distance that these handles are from the center anchor point, as well as their whatever their location is. So you can start playing with that, and then clicking and holding. Now let's say you don't like that, or you wanted to change it back to one side being a straight line segment and one side being curved. So you have those control points, and then this gets into the selection tools. And so there's two main selection tools in Illustrator. One is the regular selection tool and one is direct. So the overall selection tool, you can see it creates a bounding box that is your whole shape that you're working with. But if you just want to change a part of it, you want to use the direct selection tool here. And then you can click on one point and you can move that around. And then also that can give you a chance to work with the different handles too. Know that has caused a lot of frustration for students, and sometimes I even forget about, is the keyboard shortcut for Command H. So for many applications, that just hides the application and you go back and work with something else. In Illustrator, that will hide edges or hide your handles and control points. So even though I'm in the direct selection tool, it won't see, it'll select and then it'll be hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Command H, and then you can see when I'm in that direct selection tool, it's going to show all of those anchor points and then show the handles for the different anchor points that I'm working with currently. So people do that. Sometimes I even forget that I've done it, and then I can't find my my handles and control points and everything. So right now I have that option turned off, and so you can see with direct selection all of the different anchor points and then the handles. And so what I was talking about was, if you want one side of this to be a straight line segment and one side to have that curvature, is again, you can go in, work with these different handles, and if you move it all the way back into the anchor point precisely, it will eliminate it, and then this will be a straight area, and then this other part will be a curvature. So that changes the type of control points, and it can get a little confusing, but just play around a little bit with it and you'll really get the hang of it there. So really at this point, it's just practice makes perfect, so I'm not going to bore you with going through and tweaking this design to get exactly how I want. I think the best thing for you to do is just play around with the pen tool yourself and try out its different functions there. But let's say this was a perfect shape and I'm ready to laser cut it. I do want to just talk about the relationship between line width or stroke and thickness for the laser cutter. So when you take this file to the laser cutter, you're actually going to work with a print dialog box. So just like printing it to a regular printer on paper, you're going to do the same thing, except there's a couple little things that the laser cutter needs to know so that it knows whether to cut out a shape or whether to engrave the shape. So one thing would be with your layers, if you hide a layer, then it's not going to pay attention to it, and it's only going to deal with this shape that we want to cut out with. And then the other shape right here, looking at its properties, you can see the stroke right now is at 1 point. And so to tell the laser cutter that you want to cut this shape out, you need to change this to a precise thickness. And so different lasers have different settings, but generally our Fab Lab at CVAD, if you double click there and you type in 0.001 inches, or it'll convert to 0.072 points. And even though that's a really thin line for us, that tells the laser this is a line that you want to cut out as opposed to engrave. So technically, this is ready to go. You could save it, take it to the laser, and cut it right out. So hope this has been helpful to get you up to speed with the pen tool. Play around with it, and I'll have another video that gets into some other specifics that'll be helpful. Good luck! If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.